It's no secret that smartphone manufacturers are constantly pushing the boundaries of photography and implementing more and more computational processes to their algorithms. The end results on occasions can actually be quite good, but can smartphone imagery really be taken seriously? And can they ever eclipse real cameras in terms of image quality, functionality, and overall performance? Let's take a look. I'm going to compare the performance and image quality of the iPhone 16 Pro Max to the Canon R5. I've only had the iPhone 16 Pro Max for a few months, and so far I've been reasonably impressed with the quality of the photos and videos. iPhones, or smartphones in general, over the last 10 years or so have completely changed the way we live our lives and the way we conduct daily tasks. A camera simply takes photos and videos. It just records what's in front of it, and it does it amazingly well. I've owned the Canon R5 for almost 5 years now, and quite honestly it's completely changed the way I work, the way I approach certain jobs, and how I actually think about capturing subjects. It's that good. Even now, 5 years after it was originally released, it's still an unbelievably powerful camera, capable of shooting at 20 frames per second, at 45 megapixels in RAW and JPEG modes, along with many other features, including the new autofocus system that was, at the time, a real game changer in the photography industry. And it's continually improving with the release of the R5 Mark II and also the long-awaited R1. The iPhone is also improving all the time as new features are being added. The imaging sensor is now larger on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, which does help to improve image quality, especially in low light conditions. There's a huge list of items in the camera specification, most of which I've never heard of before and no idea what they actually do. Most of it's technical jargon and most likely software-driven processes. The R5, on the other hand, is truly remarkable, with some absolutely insane, groundbreaking features built in. Image quality. Let's take a look at the image quality. The iPhone 16 Pro Max has a 48 megapixel Sony IMX903 sensor, which is 1/1.14 inches. That's smaller than a 1-inch sensor and is a fraction of the size of a 35mm full frame sensor found on a camera like the Canon R5. The R5 has a 45 megapixel full frame CMOS, which stands for complementary metal oxide semiconductor image sensor. The more recent R5 Mark II has a stacked CMOS sensor, which allows a much faster readout speed, along with dual pixel autofocus, improving the overall performance of the focusing system. Despite what some people might think, camera technologies are improving all the time. The iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max cameras both have that 48 megapixel, 24mm full frame equivalent lens with the ability to zoom digitally to 28 and 35mm, which means you're actually losing resolution when you zoom in. There is also an ultra-wide 13mm equivalent lens at 48 megapixel, a 12 megapixel telephoto lens at 48mm focal range, and a 12 megapixel telephoto lens at 120mm, both with sensor shift optical image stabilization and autofocus. There is a digital zoom up to 25 times. Personally, I've no idea why you'd want to even bother using that. You're never ever going to get decent usable results with a 25 times digital zoom lens. So let's test out the image quality with a side-by-side comparison. These are the set of photos I'm going to compare using the range of lenses on the main camera on the iPhone 16 Pro Max to that of the Canon R5 with the 15 to 35mm lens and also the 70 to 200mm lens. Let's compare the images in Lightroom, where you'll see the image taken with the iPhone at 24mm just lacks so much detail compared to that of the Canon R5. The iPhone image was shot using the 48 megapixel lossless JPEG option. So I'm just going to zoom in on the bottle here. So I'm just going to try and get the images roughly the same. As you can see on the R5, the text on the bottle is almost readable, whereas the text on the bottle on the iPhone 16 image is kind of a bit blurred out. And these images have roughly the same amount of megapixels. They're both kind of 8K resolution, but the detail in the iPhone image just isn't there. And there's also a strange kind of color cast. So the color accuracy on the R5 image is much better. I mean, the iPhone image is not bad, it hasn't done a bad job. It's just that it just doesn't look quite as detailed and as crisp and as sharp as the R5 image. let's compare the 28mm version. It's going to be the same type of thing, because with the iPhone, what you'll notice now is that we're actually zooming in digitally, so we're actually losing pixels. So it's now 6,912 pixels wide. And of course, with the R5 image, we're just zooming in on the lens, so we're not losing any pixel data at all. Let's take a quick look at the 35mm. The text on the bottle is actually now readable. It's the same situation on the iPhone image. We're zooming in digitally, we're losing quality all the time. The text, it just isn't legible at all, and we're just degrading the image even further because we're zooming in. It's a nice feature to have. You've got a nice 48 megapixel imaging sensor, but the quality coming out of it is not going to be close to that of a real camera. Now let's take a look at the 48 and 120mm lens options on the iPhone. I'll need to switch lenses on the R5 to the RF 70-200 f2.8 lens. So it's not a completely accurate test, as I'm at 70mm on the R5 and of course 48 and then 120mm on the iPhone, but it's as close as I can get. The 48 megapixel lens is now shooting at 4032 pixels by 2268 pixels. This is because we're now using a different lens on the back of the camera, which is only producing a 12 megapixel image. On the R5, I've maintained the full sensor readout at 8192 by 5464 pixels using the 45 megapixel sensor by simply changing my lens. The difference in optical quality is even more apparent than compared to the 15 to 35mm lens. The text on the plastic bottle is almost completely readable. The image on the iPhone is even worse. The image is now extremely blurred, pixelated, and the text is barely noticeable. So just a quick comparison of the image shot at 70mm on the R5 to that of the 120mm lens option on the iPhone. You can see there's a huge difference in actual pixel data, and this actual pixel size of the image is obviously huge, but you can see the image quality is so poor on the iPhone at the 120mm. This is the sort of telephoto option. You're not even going to get close to that of the quality of a real camera. I can push the iPhone lens even further using the 25 times digital zoom. This image on the right has actually been shot at 15 times zoom. Just going to compare it quickly to the R5 image on the left using that 70 to 200mm lens. I'm now at 200mm focal distance. The iPhone image is a bit of a mess, and for me isn't really usable for anything other than viewing on your smartphone screen. Definitely not usable for any real serious kind of image editing for any type of professional use at all. The real camera has done a really great job, which is what you'd expect from expensive high quality lenses. What we also should take a look at is the image shot at 15mm on the R5 and the image shot at 13mm on the iPhone. Obviously, I'm fixed at 13mm on the iPhone, and we're at 15mm on the R5. I mean, it's close enough, but you can see here that the image on the left, which is the R5, is pretty good. I mean, the text is almost legible on the side of the bottle, whereas if I zoom in on the iPhone image, you can just see that it's just an absolute blurry sort of mess. I mean, there's virtually no detail at all. The image on the R5, the detail is really well preserved, and the overall render looks pretty nice as well. And there's this weird sort of color cast on the iPhone, which means that the colors aren't completely accurate to me. So that's a direct comparison between the sort of ultra wide angle lens on the R5 and the iPhone. Let's take a quick look at HDR photography. Another feature that almost all smartphones have built in, and is something that's been around for quite a while now, is high dynamic range photography. This is why so many people, when they look at their photos on the screen, they think they have taken the most amazing picture. It's all computational. The iPhone 16 by default is taking a set of HDR photos, realigning them and blending them together to create a higher contrast image than compared to a standard photo. This was taken with the HDR features in the Canon R5. This is an image created on the iPhone 16 Pro Max with the wide 13mm lens. Not quite exactly the same position, but roughly the same time of day. This is with all the HDR processes running by default on the iPhone. Basically, I have no real control over any of these HDR settings. The iPhone just does it all for me, which is fine as it's done a fairly good job. But how does it compare to the R5 camera? This image was taken with the main camera on the iPhone, which uses the larger sensors. photos. It's generally a nice looking image, has some good detail in areas, it's bright, noise levels are controlled, but overall there is a distinct lack of detail and sharpness than compared to the images from the R5 camera. Overall, the HDR images from the Canon camera in comparison has done a better job, even though the colours do look quite exaggerated and oversaturated, but I can easily fix this later in Lightroom. Now for things like dynamic range, I'm just going to show you a few other HDR photos, one taken with the Canon but zoomed in slightly at 28mm, and the iPhone using the 13mm ultra-wide lens. These are both roughly from the same position. The point I'm making here is the lens on the R5 camera has a constant aperture, so I'm able to zoom in and out, but also maintain the aperture I've set the camera to. This is a huge advantage when trying to record the maximum amount of detail in your scene. But when I compare the two images, the iPhone does appear to be more pleasing, sharper and brighter. That is until I zoom in, where the photo from the camera reveals more detail and a far wider range of colours. There is also an extreme lack of dynamic range on the iPhone images compared to the HDR image from the Canon R5. As you can see here, the iPhone imagery is already clipped into blacks and whites. This is straight out of camera with no additional edit. The R5 camera also provides significantly more options and settings for HDR imagery and will record far more detailed and accurate imagery due to the larger imaging sensor and the significant array of high quality lenses. The wide 13mm lens on the iPhone 16 Pro Max is not really capable of producing professional photographic results compared to a real camera. So let's look at autofocus. The R5 introduced us photographers to a whole new autofocus system with the introduction of subject and eye tracking AF, something that I use almost all the time. I have all my cameras customized with a back button style focus setup, one button with eye tracking enabled and another with a single point focus enabled. I find this method works really well and allows me to capture some extremely fast action sports and wildlife photos. I can now capture photos that were almost impossible with the old DSLR autofocus system. The iPhone does have autofocus, but there is no way I can achieve the same level of results compared to the Canon R5. The iPhone utilizes an autofocus system, but generally for simple scenes, but the Canon cameras have insanely fast and accurate autofocus settings. It's truly mind-blowing what these cameras are capable of doing. I'm simply not possible to replicate this level of image capture with an iPhone 16 Pro Max, and very much doubt any Samsung or any other smartphone would be any different. Let's take a look at the overall performance. I'm currently using the R5, the R6 and Canon R3 cameras, along with the RF 15-35, 28-70, 70-200mm lenses. Occasionally I'd use the 100-500 and 400mm for more serious or extreme work. The image I'm getting out of the R5 is extremely good. The iPhone 16 has a camera that states it's an f1.78 lens at 24mm equivalent focal range, but in reality it's actually acting more like an f9 lens compared to full frame. That's because of the 48 megapixel Sony IMX903 image sensor, which is 1/1.14 inches. That's smaller than the 1-inch sensor and is a fraction of the size of a 35mm full frame sensor. I'm able to shoot at f2.8 using a lens with a full frame sensor, allowing me to shoot at night under floodlights while maintaining a fast shutter speed to freeze the action. My camera will be set to auto ISO, but I'm generally happy with the results up to 10,000 ISO, sometimes beyond that, especially with the R3 camera. It also allows me to utilize other features such as anti-flicker shooting for when working under difficult lighting situations such as floodlights. It's unlikely smartphone cameras will ever be able to match this level of technology simply due to the size of the imaging sensor. For most sports, I'm shooting at shutter speeds of up to 1/1000 or even 1/2000th of a second, maybe even much higher at 1/4000th if I'm able to, in order to freeze the action for super sharp and detailed shots. I also have autofocus settings that can be customized for various subjects. There is not a single smartphone on the market right now that can compete with any of the autofocus technologies of any of the major camera brands. For more extreme situations, I'm relying on the burst mode of the iPhone 16 to help capture and freeze the action in front of me. Without the ability to control any of the camera settings, I'm unable to achieve decent results. What the iPhone 16 has is amazing for its size and level of portability, and the technology is genuinely impressive, but it's not capable, and I doubt will ever be capable, of producing the same level of performance and professional quality compared to a real camera. For fast action professional sports, I'm using lenses with wide apertures of f2.8 and f2, such as the RF 70-200, 28-70 and RF 400mm lenses. As you can see, the images coming out the R5 with a 400mm f2.8 lens are sharp, detailed, they're bright, and then most importantly, they're in focus, thanks to the insane eye detection autofocus capabilities. And I'm sometimes cropping in and losing 50% of the original image, but the photos are still incredibly high quality. Another subject that's really important is connectivity. Obviously, the real benefit of having a good camera on a smartphone is the ability to edit and upload to social media or WhatsApp. With my Canon cameras, it's slightly different, but also not that much slower. For example, for pro sports, I'm using a software program called Photomechanic. This allows me to transfer photos from my camera to the laptop while running automated processes. It applies metadata and descriptions, renames and numbers the files, adds a watermark if necessary. It allows me to edit the photos, places them into folders, and also uploads via FTP. This can literally be done within seconds of shooting an image. Have you ever wondered how professional sports shooters are able to get their photos out to the leading news channels and platforms such as BBC and Fox Sports, etc., within moments of something happening? This is what they're using, of course. The same software and process can be used to distribute photos onto social media as well. If you'd like to know more about Photomechanic, please view this video here. So if you have the right setup and are super organized, you can distribute files from your camera to the web very quickly. Most mirrorless cameras also allow you to connect to your smartphone via a free app. Canon has the Camera Connect app, which I use quite often. It allows me to connect wirelessly to the camera and to select the photos I want to transfer. I can then apply my photo edits and then upload to my social channels. But the advantage I have is the fact that the photos from my camera are infinitely better quality than the ones taken with a smartphone camera. But saying that, I'm also able to shoot, edit, and manipulate all the photos I'm taking using real cameras with the same, if not better, AI features and technologies, with probably even more powerful editing software. The difference is the speed at which it can now be done and uploaded and distributed to the web, and that's actually quite scary. Something that's really important for me is the functionality of the equipment that I'm using. When you take a look at a photo and think, that looks amazing, it could be because of a number of things, but most often it'll be because of aperture. And being able to control the aperture allows us to use the camera and lens to create different depth of field effects. For example, when you look at a photo and it's really sharp from corner to corner without the need for post-production, setting your camera to shoot at around f8 to f13 will create a greater depth of field, meaning more of your subject will be in focus. Now let's go in the other direction and set the camera to shoot f2.8. We're now able to create a photo with a much shallower depth of field, meaning more of our scene is blurred out, except for what we have focused on. When people say things like, wow, that photo really pops, it's normally because of the depth of field that full-frame cameras produce. Despite the impressive marketing, the iPhone has no actual camera controls such as aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Everything is performed in auto mode. Unless you buy a third-party camera app, then you may have some control over what you're doing, but even then it's not the same as using a real camera. With a real camera, it feels like I'm properly in control of what I'm doing. I have the ability to set custom controls, functions through the customization of the buttons and dials. I can set up back button focusing, change shooting and drive modes, set accurate white balance. I have the ability to shoot in JPEG and RAW formats separately to different cards. There are so many other things I can do with the camera, far too many to mention in one video. With a smartphone, there is almost no control over the creative process, which is absolutely fine if you have literally zero knowledge of how a camera actually works and you have no intention of ever learning the technicalities of a real camera. It's all done for you in a little box of tricks with a load of computational algorithms that will take the creative process completely out of your control. But then some people just want something that's simple and effective and just gets the job done. And that's where the iPhone and most other smartphones are actually really good. However, the creative process requires knowledge and skill. Being a professional photographer or videographer requires a lot of understanding of the equipment and technical expertise. Smartphone cameras are most often in auto mode, and therefore users generally don't really require any technical skills or knowledge. It's just press a button. On the R3 and R5 cameras, I have custom controls set up purposely so I can quickly change from shooting fast action sport at extreme shutter speeds to shooting at slower speeds in order to create motion blur effects. That's just one example. What about depth of field? I can change the aperture from f2.8 all the way to f22 if I wanted to. f2.8 gives me a shallow depth of field and nicely blurred out backgrounds, where f8 to f11 produces a greater depth of field, where more of my scene will be in focus. As a professional photographer, I need that creative control over my camera, the tool that I'm using to produce the images I want. Another really important factor is portability. Well, the iPhone clearly wins in this department. There is no question about the convenience of having 13mm to 120mm focal range and beyond in a device that can fit into your pocket. Regardless of the overall image quality, the simplicity and convenience is why so many people are content with using their smartphone over a compact camera, DSLR or mirrorless camera. It's also the reason why the camera industry has seen a huge decline in sales over the last 10 to 15 years. But if image quality is what you're after and you work professionally, then you'll need to accept you'll be carrying around at least 20 to 30 kilograms of gear in order to maintain a level of professional quality, because a smartphone is not going to give you pro results. And of course, let's take a look at the costs involved. Normally, for high action professional sports, I'm using the R3, R5 or R6 cameras with the RF 70 to 200, the 28-70 and 400mm lenses. This is around 20 to 30,000 US dollars worth of gear compared to the 1,200 for the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Photography gear, especially at the professional end, can be extremely expensive. The difference between an f2.8 lens and f4 can be hugely significant when out in the field, so using the fastest aperture lenses you can afford is essential. Then of course, on top of that, you'll probably need a laptop, SD and CF Express cards, a card reader and a whole load of other stuff. It all adds up. The smartphone is a device that just fits in your pocket. It can be useful for a lot of things, but at a professional level, I'm always going to use my real camera such as my R5 for many years to come. Thanks for watching. I hope this video has been of some help. Please give it a like and a share, and also subscribe for more videos.